are these things?
Gremlins.
One of the most beloved Christmas movies almost traumatized an entire generation of children, and the studio knew it would happen. The director fought to keep a scene so disturbing that executives called emergency meetings to remove it, but Steven Spielberg himself stepped in to save it. And here's the twist. The writer admitted he created the whole thing while lying awake in a roach-infested New York apartment, terrified by the sounds of scratching coming from inside his walls. Those scratches became gremlins. That disturbing scene became iconic. And that Christmas movie, it literally rewrote the rules of American cinema. We're counting down 23 insane facts about Joe Dante's 1984 creature feature, from exploding animatronics to defecating monkeys, from beheaded mothers in the original script to the birth of an entirely new movie rating. This is a masterclass in creative chaos, barely held together by latex and luck. Let's unpack how one of the strangest holiday films ever made clawed its way into existence, starting at number 23. Number 23. The Flashdance parody. When the Gremlins take over the movie theater, one of them performs an elaborate parody of Jennifer Beals' iconic dance from Flashdance, complete with leg warmers and synchronized moves. The song accompanying the scene, Gremlins Mega Madness, was performed by Michael Sembello, the exact same artist who sang Maniac, the theme from Flashdance. It's a weirdly specific pop culture reference embedded in the middle of a monster movie, and it's absolutely perfect. The Gremlins don't just destroy, they satirize. Number 22. The Cameo Convention. The Inventors Convention scene is packed with Easter eggs and celebrity cameos. Steven Spielberg himself appears riding a motorized wheelchair through the background, a blink and miss it moment. Composer Jerry Goldsmith shows up as a man in a telephone booth who glances directly at the camera. Legendary Warner Brothers animator Chuck Jones, creator of Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, makes an on-screen cameo during the scene where Billy and his co-worker trade insults at the bar. The entire convention sequence is stuffed with references to classic science fiction, The Time Machine from The Time Machine, Robbie the Robot from Forbidden Planet, celebrating genre history. Number 21. The Marketing Misfire. Despite all its violence and horror, Warner Brothers marketed Gremlins like it was a children's movie. Plush Gizmo toys, coloring books, lunchboxes, and even Gremlins branded breakfast cereal flooded stores in time for Christmas 1984. The cereal box featured adorable Gizmo on the front, with decals of the evil Gremlins tucked inside. The merchandising push leaned hard into Gizmo's cuteness, completely downplaying the film's darker elements. Parents bought the toys, saw the ads, and naturally assumed they were taking their kids to see something like E.T. What they got instead was microwave explosions, blender violence, and melting monsters. Thousands of childhoods were scarred. Number 20. The sequel nobody wanted, until they saw it. By the time Gremlins 2, The New Batch, arrived in 1990, director Joe Dante had grown tired of studio interference and censorship battles, so he went completely rogue and turned the sequel into a giant middle finger to Hollywood itself. Gremlins drink genetic serums and mutate into bizarre forms. There's a full musical number. There's a female gremlin in drag. There's a brain gremlin who becomes eloquent and intellectual. It's absolute anarchic madness, a satirical demolition of every studio note they'd received on the first film. Audiences in 1990 were baffled. The film underperformed financially, but over the decades, Gremlins 2 has been completely re-evaluated as cult comedy gold, a fearless experiment in self-aware chaos. Number 19. The Hill Valley Connection. If the snowy streets of Kingston Falls look eerily familiar, there's a good reason. Gremlins was shot on the exact same Universal Studios backlot that would become Hill Valley in Back to the Future, which released just 1 year later. The production team simply redressed the buildings, swapped out signage, and covered everything in fake snow. Same courthouse, same town square, completely different chaos. If you watch both films closely, you'll never be able to unsee it. Billy and Gizmo theoretically could have walked past Doc Brown's garage if they turned the right corner. Number 18. The Summer Surprise Strategy. Gremlins was originally scheduled for a Christmas release, which made perfect thematic sense, but Warner Brothers found themselves with a serious problem in early 1984. They had no major summer tentpole to compete against Ghostbusters and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, so they made a gamble and moved Gremlins up to June 8th, the exact same day Ghostbusters opened nationwide. It was an unprecedented release strategy. Two massive films from different studios going head to head. Both became enormous hits. Gremlins opened with $12.5 million, finishing second to Ghostbusters by just over $1 million. By the end of its theatrical run, Gremlins had earned nearly $150 million domestically, making it the fourth highest grossing film of 1984. Number 17. The Voice Casting Network.
I'm the voice of Gizmo.
From
I
Gremlins.
The voices bringing the creatures to life came from an unexpected web of connections. Frank Welker, famous for voicing Fred in Scooby-Doo, was cast as Stripe, the lead gremlin. Welker personally suggested that Howie Mandel, a comedian friend of his, would be perfect for Gizmo's voice. Mandel recorded his lines in complete isolation, improvising sounds based purely on physical cues, without ever seeing footage. He created Gizmo's squeaky personality entirely in a sound booth, with zero context about what was happening on screen. Meanwhile, Michael Winslow, best known for his vocal sound effects in the Police Academy films, contributed additional gremlin voices alongside Welker, adding layers of chaos to the creature's cacophony. Number 16. The Gizmo Song Secret. When Gizmo sings his memorable little song in the film, that's not Howie Mandel. Composer Jerry Goldsmith wrote the piece and needed someone with a more innocent, childlike voice. He enlisted a 13-year-old girl from his synagogue to perform it. Her name was never widely publicized, but that anonymous teenager's voice became part of one of the film's most endearing moments. Number 15. The Tim Burton Alternate Universe. Before Joe Dante got the job, Steven Spielberg briefly considered Tim Burton to direct Gremlins. Burton had just released his acclaimed short film Frankenweenie, and there was significant buzz around his dark, quirky sensibility. But Burton lacked feature film experience, and Warner Brothers wasn't ready to gamble on an unproven director for a project this ambitious. The role went to Dante instead. Just 1 year later, Burton released his first theatrical feature, Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Imagine the completely different film Gremlins would have been in Burton's gothic German expressionist hands. Number 14. The Casting Chemistry Test. Zach Galligan almost didn't get the role of Billy Peltzer. Emilio Estevez and Judd Nelson were both seriously considered for the part. Either would have brought a completely different energy to the film. But during Galligan's chemistry read with Phoebe Cates, something unexpected happened. At the end of the audition scene, Galligan, who didn't have much professional experience yet, put his head on Cates' shoulder. It wasn't planned, it wasn't acting. It was a genuine, spontaneous gesture. Spielberg was watching from behind the camera. He immediately turned to the casting director and said, "That's our guy." That one authentic moment of chemistry landed Galligan the lead role in a film that would define his career. Number 13. Spielberg redesigned Gizmo's ears. Even small details got Spielberg's attention. Chris Wallace's initial Gizmo design featured brown fur and ears that were fully covered in hair. After presenting the concept, word came back from Spielberg's office with a specific note: remove the fur from the ears and make them translucent. This seemingly minor change transformed Gizmo's appearance, making him look more vulnerable and expressive. The light shining through those bare translucent ears gave him a distinctive silhouette that helped make him instantly recognizable. Wallace incorporated the feedback, and Spielberg's instinct proved correct. Those ears became one of Gizmo's most iconic features. Number 12. The Butt Puppet Innovation. Not all the Gremlins were sophisticated animatronics. The crew created what they affectionately called butt puppets, 3/4 scale gremlin figures that puppeteers operated by literally inserting their arms up through the bottom of the puppet. These simpler mechanisms could really only perform basic biting motions, though occasionally rods were attached to the elbows to allow crude hand articulation. You can spot them throughout the Dory's Tavern and movie theater scenes if you look carefully. In a few shots, you can even glimpse puppeteers' arms visible behind the bar. The name butt puppet came from, well, exactly where you'd expect, given how they were operated. Despite their limitations, these cruder puppets helped fill out crowd scenes and sold the illusion of a full gremlin invasion. Number 11. The Subfloor Solution. Budget constraints forced creative problem solving that made production even harder. Most puppet films build sets on raised platforms, so puppeteers can comfortably work underneath. Gremlins didn't have the money for that. production designer Jim Spencer came up with an affordable alternative: drill holes directly through existing floors and walls, then have puppeteers operate from cramped subfloor positions. This meant the crew spent weeks contorted in uncomfortable spaces beneath sets, threading cables and controls through the floor while trying to make Gremlins look alive on camera. The bar scene at Dory's Tavern, one of the film's most memorable sequences, took an entire week to shoot because of this setup. Chris Wallace recalled being burnt to a cinder by the time they finished that single location. Number 10. The Puppet Army Challenge. Chris Wallace faced an absolutely terrifying task. The script called for dozens of gremlins doing wildly different things simultaneously: eating, drinking, dancing, driving, shooting guns, watching movies. Nothing like this had ever been attempted with puppets at this scale. Wallace later admitted the project terrified him from the very beginning. There was no template, no established workflow for puppet effects on this level. He had to essentially invent new techniques as production demanded them. The Gizmo puppets proved especially frustrating because they were roughly 10 inches tall, far too small for traditional puppet mechanisms to fit inside and still convey emotion. They ended up building multiple versions: standard puppets for wide shots, oversized heads for emotional close-ups, walking rigs, tiptoeing rigs, and specialized animatronics for specific gags. Many of these complicated contraptions never worked properly and were abandoned during filming. Number 9. The Monkey Disaster. Before committing to puppets, the production team tried something completely unhinged. Director Joe Dante and special effects designer Chris Wallace briefly explored using trained monkeys to play the gremlins. They figured they could just strap gremlin masks onto the animals and let them move naturally. They brought in a rhesus monkey, carefully fitted it with a prototype gremlin head, and released it into the editing room for a test run. What happened next became legendary on set. The monkey immediately panicked, tore the mask off, and proceeded to jump around the room in absolute terror while defecating everywhere. Dante described watching the chaos unfold and thinking, "It became quite apparent that this was not the way we were going to do it." Chris Wallace, the creature designer, was relieved. He'd been pushing for puppets all along. The monkey incident convinced everyone that animatronics were the only viable path forward, even though they'd be exponentially more expensive and temperamental. Number 8. The rating that changed everything. Gremlins and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom created such intense backlash that they literally forced American cinema to create a new rating. Both films were rated PG, and both traumatized children across the country. Parents who brought their kids expecting family-friendly entertainment instead watched Gremlins get microwaved, blended, and set on fire, and Temple of Doom showed a man's beating heart being ripped from his chest before he was lowered into molten lava. The complaints flooded in. The MPAA realized the gap between PG and R was far too wide, but they also recognized that slapping an R rating on films like Gremlins would be unfair and financially devastating. Spielberg, who had directed Temple of Doom and produced Gremlins, called MPAA President Jack Valenti directly with a suggestion: create a middle ground rating between PG and R. Valenti agreed immediately. Within 2 months of Gremlins' release, the PG-13 rating was born. The first film to receive the new rating was The Flamingo Kid, though Red Dawn became the first PG-13 film to actually hit theaters on August 10, 1984. Gremlins itself kept its original PG rating and has never been resubmitted for reclassification. Number 7. The Santa Story That Almost Died. The most controversial moment in Gremlins almost got cut before anyone saw it. Midway through the film, Phoebe Cates delivers a monologue explaining why her character Kate hates Christmas. The story is genuinely disturbing. When she was 9 years old, her father disappeared on Christmas Eve. Days later, firemen broke through their chimney and discovered his corpse. He dressed up as Santa Claus with an armful of presents, attempted to surprise his family by climbing down the chimney, slipped, broke his neck, and died instantly. Kate concludes with the haunting line, "And that's how I found out there was no Santa Claus." After the first preview screening, Warner Brothers executives demanded the scene be removed immediately. They couldn't tell if it was supposed to be tragic or darkly comedic, and they feared it would confuse audiences. Director Joe Dante refused. He argued that this tonal ambiguity, this uncomfortable mixture of horror and black comedy, perfectly encapsulated what Gremlins was trying to achieve. Dante had final cut approval, but he wouldn't have won this fight alone. Steven Spielberg backed him up. Chris Columbus later revealed it was his favorite sequence in the entire film, inspired by a 1964 Gahan Wilson cartoon from Playboy magazine showing chimney cleaners discovering Santa's skeleton. The scene stayed in. 40 years later, people are still debating whether they're supposed to laugh or feel horrified. That's precisely the point. Number 6. Spielberg's strategic vision. Spielberg saw something the studio didn't. He recognized that underneath all the gore, Gremlins had the bones of a genuinely original creature feature that could reach beyond just horror fans. But Chris Columbus was a young, inexperienced screenwriter who'd only written one previous film. He wasn't in any position to tell Steven Spielberg no. Spielberg gave him clear direction. This needs to reach a wider audience. What you've written could be great, but it's an R-rated horror film. There's a way to make what you've written reach a much wider audience. Columbus took the notes. The beheading got cut. The dog lived. The McDonald's massacre disappeared. But Spielberg made sure they kept the scares. He just insisted they not completely traumatize children. The balance they struck would later cause massive controversy and literally change the American film rating system. Number 4. Spielberg's lucky glance. Steven Spielberg, already the most powerful filmmaker in Hollywood, after Jaws and E.T., wasn't even supposed to read Gremlins. He was leaving his office one afternoon when he happened to glance at his assistant's desk. The title caught his eye. Just the word Gremlins sitting there on a script cover. Intrigued, he grabbed it and read the entire thing over the weekend. 3 days later, Columbus got a phone call that would define his career. Spielberg wanted to buy it. Columbus later said the whole thing came down to 50% talent and 50% pure luck, and he got astronomically lucky that Spielberg happened to look at the right desk at the right moment. Number 3. The nightmare that started it all. Chris Columbus wasn't trying to write a movie when he created Gremlins. He was trying to survive. Living in a cramped New York City apartment in the early 1980s, Columbus was a struggling writer surrounded by an infestation of mice and cockroaches. Night after night, he'd lie awake listening to scratching, scuttling, and chewing sounds coming from inside his walls. Instead of calling an exterminator, he let his paranoia spiral into creativity. What if those weren't just rodents? What if tiny monsters were watching him from the shadows? That sleepless terror became a spec script, a writing sample he never expected anyone to buy. He sent it to about 50 producers. 49 passed. One yes changed cinema history. Number 2. Gizmo was supposed to turn evil. In the early drafts of the original script, Gizmo didn't remain Billy's cute sidekick. He was going to become Stripe, the leader of the evil Gremlins. That's right, our cuddly hero was originally the villain in disguise. The adorable Mogwai would transform early in the first act and become the film's terrifying antagonist. But Spielberg insisted they keep a character the audience could root for throughout the entire movie. He wanted that heart, that spark of innocence. He told Columbus and director Joe Dante that audiences needed an emotional anchor, not just monsters destroying a town. So they split the character in two. Gizmo stayed sweet, and Stripe was born as his evil counterpart. It made Gizmo more iconic, but also created a nightmare for the puppet department, who now had to design two complex animatronics instead of one. More importantly, it gave the film its soul. Without Spielberg's intervention, there would be no lovable Gizmo. There would be no emotional core. There would be no reason for audiences to care. That single decision transformed Gremlins from a straightforward horror movie into something genuinely special. Number 1. The life-saving transformation. Here's the fact that changed everything. Here's the moment that saved Gremlins from being just another forgotten creature feature. Spielberg made one more crucial demand that reshaped the film at the very last second, and director Joe Dante admitted it's the main reason we still love this movie 40 years later. At the film's climax, Gizmo saves the day by opening a window blind and exposing Stripe to sunlight. Originally, the sequence showed Gizmo lifting the first blind, followed by Billy opening another to finish Stripe off. Billy was the hero, but Spielberg suggested changing the scene to make it crystal clear that Gizmo, not Billy, is the true hero of the film. Dante made the edit. That tiny puppet in a toy car became the one who defeats the monster. Gizmo got his hero moment. And that decision, making the vulnerable, innocent creature the one who saves everyone, gave Gremlins its heart. It's why you remember Gizmo 40 years later. It's why kids begged for Gizmo toys. It's why the film works as both horror and hope. Spielberg understood something fundamental. Audiences don't just want to see monsters destroyed. They want to see innocence triumph. They want to see the smallest, weakest character become the bravest. Gizmo's heroism made Gremlins timeless. From mice scratching in Chris Columbus's walls to a cultural phenomenon that rewrote American film ratings, Gremlins remains one of the most gleefully anarchic studio films ever made. It's a Christmas movie that traumatized children. It's a horror film marketed with breakfast cereal. It's a cautionary tale about ignoring warnings, wrapped in practical effects wizardry that still holds up 4 decades later. The Gremlins destroyed Kingston Falls on screen. Behind the scenes, they nearly destroyed their own production with malfunctioning puppets, defecating monkeys, and studio executives threatening to cut the film's most memorable scene. But somehow, through sheer creative chaos and Steven Spielberg's strategic vision, it all came together into something genuinely original. So have you watched Gremlins yet? Tell us in the comments what you think about it, and which of these facts you already knew, and what surprised you most. If you haven't, go watch it when you get the chance, and then come back to tell us about it. And if you like this video, hit that like button. Subscribe for more deep dives into films that changed everything. Thanks for watching.